let me tell you a quick secret. I am completely insecure. I've been coding for 7+ years now, and I still have no idea how computers work. However, recently I've decided to change that, and I'm giving myself full 7 days to learn the hardest programming language, which is assembly. And if you don't know what assembly is like this ancient looking language where you write instructions directly to the CPU. However, as a total beginner, I had zero idea where do I even start. My motto for learning new things is learn by doing, which means don't do tutorials, start with real life projects instead. However, assembly is so complicated that I was like, what the fuck am I even looking at? I had no idea where do I even start. So I decided, hey, let me actually go to Gemini and ask it a couple of questions to see what the fuck even is assembly. Now, in order to write assembly, first you need to understand how CPU work. First, in the middle, there are registers, are these super fast little storages inside the CPU. When you want to put any value there, you just put move, the name of the register, and the value. So I understood them very quickly. I made some notes, wrote my first assembly program, compiled it, and it worked pretty much on the first try. And I thought, damn, this shit is so easy. Oh boy, was I absolutely wrong about this. Then I tried writing hello world, and it absolutely just humbled me. In all languages, it's literally the simplest program that you can write. In assembly, it uses a ton of new concepts that I had no idea about. By the way, I don't even undergo here, but I've spent hours literally trying to understand this, constantly beating myself up, thinking I'm a senior developer, struggling to understand and write hello world. I mean, I am totally a fraud. Looking back, it was the most important part of the whole journey. I could easily go and say, okay, I surrender, this is too hard, it's not for me, but I didn't. What happened after that was so much better. Continued to simplify the concepts to make it easier for me to understand. Remember, if you're learning anything, at some point it might be extremely hard, especially every engineering skill. On top of that, Gemini has started to hallucinate like crazy. There's no such thing as assembly, there are like 10 versions of assembly, each one for different CPU architecture. And I was learning for macOS ARM, which is honestly one of the least common assembly variations. That's probably why AI has hallucinated. And it's honestly so crazy how AI can be so insanely smart and so stupid at the same time. After that, I said, okay, fuck AI, let me actually go to a classic YouTube tutorial route. And then I stumbled upon a YouTube video from a great YouTuber called Low Level Learning. And he mentioned this strategy. You first take the code written in C, you compile it to assembly, and then you read it. You see what the output. Did that, and honestly, it was even worse, because on top of all the concepts that I had no idea about, now the new ones appeared as well. So I said, okay, let me actually go back to the roots. I went back to ChatGPT and to study and learn mode. ChatGPT did such a better job than Gemini. There was still something extremely big that was missing. I completely forgot about my rule, which is learn by building. I said, okay, no more analyzing code. Then I asked ChatGPT for some absolute basic exercises. Then I opened Vim and immediately started attacking them. And finally, after hours of work, I was able to get some progress. Here's exactly what I learned. So CPU has limited amount of registers. So you also need a bigger place to store data. Now this is where memory comes in. Now, in order to store things in memory, we use something called the stack. So stack is a very simple data structure where you can only add things on top or take things from the top. So look at this stack of books here. I cannot take anything from the middle because everything will fall down, so I can only add new books on top, or I can remove the ones from top. Okay, so let me show you now how a stack works in a high-level language. You can imagine this is how it works in JavaScript, Python, assembly, C, etc. So we got a very simple program here, function main that calls function add, adds two values and returns. So first of all, what we do is we create something called a stack frame. So a stack frame is really a piece of the stack that belongs to this specific function. So in this case, it's main. And we are initializing, so we are pushing two values onto the stack, x and y. First, we are adding x here, then we are adding y. Now, we are calling function add, which is a separate function, so it has its own stack frame. So we are adding the stack frame here, function add, Function add has its own variable called sum. So we are initializing this variable onto the stack. So we are pushing it. Now what happens is we're returning it. Now when we return it, we are removing the entire stack frame of a function. So we are popping off the sum variable from the stack. Then we go back to main. We are returning function. So we are doing the same thing. We are popping off y and x. And this is pretty much how a stack works. And then I learned about ifs and loops. Honestly, thought they will be hard, but they will actually extremely easy. First, what we do is we put value 10 inside the first register. Then we do something that's called compare, which is CMP. So we compare x0 against value 5. And if the value is greater, we do this branch GT, which stands for greater. If this value is greater, we do this, make value x0 100. Okay, so there's no such thing as a loop in assembly because loops are just if statements tied together. So in the same way as before, first what we do is we initialize value of x1 to be 0, then we compare x1 against 5, and if it's greater, we end the function, so we're returning it. And if it's not, we are adding 1 to it, and then we come back here. So we can imagine it's like recursion, and pretty much that's it. During my learning process, I've made two major mistakes. First one was I forgot about the basics. I was so confident in myself, my idea looked like this. I go in, I read code, I understand the code, and that's it. So this has been working for me for high-level languages, but for assembly, it completely wasn't working. I needed to learn the basics first of how the CPU actually works in order to understand all the registers, the if statements, etc. My second mistake was actually the order of learning, because I started with the simplest program and then I went to Hello World, which is much more complicated in assembly. Now, in a normal language, this is great, but in assembly, it makes zero sense. So if you're trying to learn assembly, here's actually the route that I recommend. Now, so the first one would be return any value, where you learn registers, store any value in memory, which learns the basics of memory, because you cannot rely on registers or there's limited amount of them, and sometimes you will want to store a lot of values. Then there is storing multiple values, which introduces the stack, and nested functions, which looks something like this, where we imagine we have one function calling another, and that function calls another function, which also introduces new concepts to the stack. Then we got ifs and loops, which really just stands for the base of every software, and arrays and strings, because there's no such thing in assembly as arrays and strings, so you have to just essentially build them from scratch. But honestly, if you ask me whether it was worth it, I say fuck yes, absolutely. It's honestly been a lot of fun, and also it helps you with understanding how computers work and how programming languages work as well. And on top of that, every instruction in C can be translated to assembly, so you actually are learning two languages at the same time. I think with rapid improvements in AI coding, knowing the basics is becoming more important than ever. And understanding CPUs not only help you with programming, but also it can help you with how any system works. Think of any distributed system, any database, file storage, operating system, etc. Assembly is also great for understanding security. Don't take my word for it. Listen to what the #1 cybersecurity expert on YouTube has to say about learning assembly.
Learning to write assembly is one of the easiest ways to get better at programming, to learn how computers work at a low level, and write better and safer code.